marketing, our brand partnerships, and C-level engagement. I'm really honored today to be joined by three incredible action leaders. Amanda Brinkman, Chief Brand Officer at Deluxe, Jamila Hunter, Senior Vice President of Current and Alternative Programming at Freeform, which is Disney's young adult network. And of course, we have Baron Davis, Business Inside the Game founder and CEO and former NBA All-Star. First of all, it's an honor to go after the last panel. It was so powerful. I had so many questions and thoughts on it, but I'm going to try and stick to my script as long as I can before I go off script. If you've seen me speak before, you know that is what I usually do anyway. So, but I think it's important to, again, we've been talking about this a lot, but we're currently facing a health crisis, an economic crisis, and a racial injustice crisis. And as marketers and content creators, we are doing this while we are also under a magnifying glass. Understandably, this is creating a lot of tension. If you say the wrong thing, you risk getting canceled, but staying silent on these topics is equally unacceptable. People are rightfully voting with their dollars. They want to support companies that align with their values. They want to support companies that care about them and their communities. So now, more than ever, your company's brand purpose needs to be reflected in the way that you're showing up. There's no more gray area. If you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing, and that is simply no longer acceptable. So when Anda approached me about this panel, I wanted to highlight people who are not just talking about needing to do something. They are and have been driving change by using their platforms as storytellers and influencers. As you know, representation, beyond representation, how you are presented equally matters. So today you're going to hear from this amazing trio on how they're using their storytelling platforms in an inclusive, authentic, and inspiring way. So with that, I'm going to go first to Jamila. Jamila, so from ABC to Disney, you've always been developing content that's authentic and relatable. Blackish is just one great example. Why has it always been important for you to produce real stories about real people?
First of all, Cristina, thank you so much for having me. And honestly, I'm honored to be here with Amanda and Baron and you, because all of you are doing amazing work in ways that all touch the work that I do. As a person of color who's grown up in this society, the importance of storytelling and the images in the media in terms of how we as a society understand each other and others has something that I've just been very aware of from the time I was a child, which you do if you're other in our society. So I think my entry point to any sort of career in this industry was always mindful of, yes, being entertaining and all of being escapist, but also really going, you really move the needle, like you really do something if you tap into a conversation that can be meaningful and impactful and advance our society. For me, and Cristina, you've known me a long time, that's the bigger picture, not just like the box office or the ratings, but like, can you look back at society and say, wow, there was an impact because of the stories that we told? So that is just, for me, has always been a touch point. And I've been very fortunate to work at companies, not even fortunate, I've chosen companies and cultures that aligned with that mission. There are jobs I did not take because I went, oh, you are not driven by the same commitment to that vision. And that wasn't the right place for me as a creative executive. But being an advocate for voices that feel like they reflect our audience and advance an important conversation is what is the best part of my job. So yeah, I think that answered your question, right?
It absolutely answered my question. Okay. Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking, I was talking to my husband the other night. We were talking about the fact that you and I have known each other since we were in our 20s yesterday.
But we're only 22. What do you mean? It was 2 years.
But back then,
so for like the last 10 years.
Right, exactly, maybe. We were wanting to do things where we could use our platforms, like where we could drive change, and it felt like a long stretch back then, but it's great to see. And I think what you said is equally important. You know, we talk a lot about external, but internal is also important. If you want to have great talent, like the talent that, you know, like that Jamila, Amanda, and of course Baron's an entrepreneur, but the people that he invests in, you want to have people who are proud to work at your company. Which brings me to Baron. When you retired from the MBA, you could have done a bunch of different things, but you decided instead to launch Business Inside the Game, amongst many other initiatives. But mostly today, I wanted to understand more about Business Inside the Game, because when we were at an event in LA last fall, you said something that really stuck with me. You said that you needed to be a man of service. Why is that so important for you?
For me, I would say, my entrepreneurial career started my third year in the MBA when I decided to leave my agent and become my own agent. And the only reason why I did that, because, I wanted to better understand myself, and I could pay for, all the things that I wanted to learn, film, music, all the creative things. And had I had an agent, I would have probably just, stuck to basketball. So for me, Business Inside the Game was thinking about myself as a pioneer, right? And trying different things, right? Carving out space so the next generation and the next generation can actually walk a path that felt easy, right? Or a path that was laid out as far as marketing, or the athlete that wants to be an actor, the athlete that wants to invest in film, or in tech, right? I would be the sacrificial lamb. And so for me, I think standing out and being a person of service really means to me is being responsible for solving problems, right? Being solution-based, thinking about people, hearing, all perspectives, right? All perspectives of life, the love, the hate, right? The celebration, the jealousy, and then figuring out, what is the initial fabric, right? Or what is in someone's heart, right? And start to really match intent with purpose, right? And I think that's where we are as a country, as a world, is our intent is really not matching the purpose, right, for the people that it's intending for. And so for me, just being a person of service allows me to listen, to learn, and connect the dots.
I had to also thank you. I don't know if I've had a chance to let you know how powerful it was. We ran your Make Change video that you filmed with us on top of the Lena Horne Awards. And we were able to, as part of that sponsorship, bring in a lot of kids from the different boroughs in New York who were focused on creative. And it was really powerful to run your video at the top of it, especially when you said that the future of work looks like me. It is important to see what you hope to aspire to become. So thank you again for always being a great ally in this space.
Well, thank you for the platform. I appreciate it.
I can't talk about brand purpose without inviting my other bestie, Amanda Brinkman, to this conversation. Sometimes you meet someone and you feel like you've known them for 100 years. I think that's what happened when Amanda and I first met in Minneapolis. We were talking about doing something around our larger conference, Dreamforce, and I started learning more about small business revolution, which is really blew my mind. And I love, people talk about using your platform for change, but then they overcomplicate it with it's not possible. But can you explain to me how you ingeniously took marketing dollars and created a successful TV show?
Oh, well, thank you. And I want to echo Baron and Jamila's sentiments of thanking you for having me on this panel. It's an honor. So the Small Business Revolution is a TV show. It's a series where each season we revitalize a different small town's main street through its small businesses. And Deluxe, as a company, serves 4.5 million small businesses. We do everything a small business would need from a marketing perspective or financial operations perspective. And so we say our brand purpose is supporting small businesses and supporting businesses so communities can thrive. But I'm a big believer that if you just identify a brand purpose and it just hangs on a wall, then all it is a new glorified version of what you would call a mission statement. I'm very passionate that brands have to be taking actual brand action. You can't just say you stand for something, you have to be doing something. So if we say we love small businesses, then we need to be out there doing something good for them. And the best thing you can do for small businesses is support them and go and buy from them. And so while it is a TV show, the original vision and still the the bed of this work is really around creating a movement to inspire more people to support small businesses. And I know this entire panel is passionate about this as well. We believe that storytelling is a way to inspire people to support small businesses. When you watch one of these episodes, you hear about why they started their business, what's hard about running their business, what their kids are learning by watching them be entrepreneurs. You fall in love with their story. You literally put a face to the business. And then you as the viewer and as a consumer recognize the importance of supporting small businesses and putting your money where your mouth is and supporting them with your dollars. And so we do the show certainly because it's great for Deluxe, but on our way to that, we're doing well by doing good. Doing well for us is getting the Deluxe brand in front of small businesses. But on our way to doing that, we are doing good for the very community that we serve. And so we're not only changing the lives of the businesses that we're working with in the show, on screen as well as in real life, but again, we're creating this groundswell of a movement to inspire people to support small businesses. And so, yeah, these are our marketing dollars. It wasn't incremental dollars that we found to do really rich content. We just so wholeheartedly believed in authentic content. We felt like that would actually stretch our spend by investing in these stories and investing in real people. And it certainly has provided those results, but I just think it's the right thing to do. If you say you stand for something, show that.
I love that. And we love that. We at Salesforce are definitely committing to invest in the show next year so that we can deepen our partnership with you. I think, Jamila, you said, so I almost used it in my opening remarks because I love it so much, but I didn't want to steal it from you. But I'm going to use it now anyway. You talked about optical allyship. What is that? And what can we do to make sure in our individual roles that we're not doing that?
Well, look, as Cristina knows, it is definitely not my phrase, but one of the assistants, and his name is Adam. He's amazing, but you can't steal him. He already pitched a show that I bought and developed. He's going fast. But
I always do her assistants. Yeah.
Oh, he's great. He's amazing. We were talking about, the environment that we are in and how a lot of companies are, putting up something on Instagram and putting a banner. And as a company, our network, as Cristina said, which focuses on millennial and Gen Z audiences, we were really talking to the younger people at our organization about, just how we show up, how we should show up as a channel targeting them. And as I said, Adam literally said the phrase, he said, well, look, none of us really want to see optical allyship. And as Cristina said, I was like, is that a thing? What does that mean? They have lots of phrases, you guys. They're on it, this Gen Z. But what he said is exactly that. He said, I understand that a lot of people are putting up posts and memes and saying things, but we really want to open up the lid of the car and say, what's in your engine? What are you doing every day? Right. Are you walking the walk? Is your the people that are in your C-suite supporting what you're saying about diversity? Are the advertisers you're in business with philosophically aligned with your mandate? For me, it was inspiring to hear that they weren't kind of going, oh, that's great. You put up a tweet or you threw something on Instagram. That means I'm supporting there. And I think all of you are seeing this. As you said, they're supporting with their dollars and they're really scrutinizing what is going on in terms of the leadership, in terms of the investments that companies are making. And all of that, I think, should have always been important. But I think it definitely for the Gen Z and millennials, and increasingly for my generation, they're not about it. Like, they live in a digital age. They know that pictures aren't perfect. They know that they use special lights and filters, and they see past the facades. And when it comes to brands they want to support, they want it to be authentic. So that is my long-winded analysis of when he said optical allyship. And as I said, it's been very meaningful for me as not just storytellers, but as programmers and advertisers are talking about what we do for our audience. It's something I've been very mindful of.
I have a question, and it is, I guess any of you can answer this. It's always interesting to see people get confused about how to do this, how to tell inclusive stories, how to tell authentic stories. What is the brand purpose? How, Jamila, maybe I'll start with you. How do you how do you do this? How do you make sure that the stories that you tell are reflective of the societies in which we live and work? And then Baron, how do you activate your ecosystem of celebrity influencers and athletes to get up and talk about things that, as Don Lemon mentioned the other day, is not always, it scares some people.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the, again, for my role as an executive who is hearing pitches and buying projects, as you said, you're literally sitting with people. So if someone is coming in and telling me a story that's not authentic, you know it pretty clearly. But and a big part of the reason, and I joined Freeform in January, so I don't have problems like pounding my chest because they're not, I'm joining them. But a show like Good Trouble that has been on the air there for 2 years, Patrisse Cullors, who is co-founder of Black Lives Matter, is in the writer's room on that show.
Wow.
So if you watch it, and it is on Hulu, I'll give a shout out, you can catch up. But there is a character on there played by Zuri Adele, who's an African-American woman, who's a Black Lives Matter activist. And very much of the storylines are inspired by real events that are coming, because our writer's room is not just a writer's room of privileged people sitting in the suburbs, but Patrisse is in the writer's room. And if you turn on CNN, she's also going to be there. And so I think for the shows that I've worked on that are really serious, whether that was Fresh Off the Boat, which was created by an immigrant writer and is produced by Melvin Marr, whose parents are immigrants, and they're not all of the same ethnicity, but they all shared an experience of being an immigrant in America. And that went down from, again, our showrunner to the executive producer. So I think it's extremely important in terms of not only who you buy the story from, like actually the creator, but if it's not them, the producers and the people in the room with them that are informing those stories is extremely important. And as I said, every place you sell your project to as a producer, if you're Amanda or Baron, will maybe have a different bar for their expectations there. Again, for me as an executive, when we bought Blackish, literally Kenya Barris, Anthony Anderson, and Lawrence Fishburne sat in the room, and Anthony brought the book that was the bro mitzvah he'd thrown for his son. Like, that's how authentic our pilot story is it was like literally something that Anthony did.
Right.
So again, I'm not saying everything has to be that in alignment, but really, again, when you're telling stories, I think it's essential to make sure that people you're working with, their life experience, are listeners and are going to bring the people in the room, as Good Trouble did, to go, oh wait, I'm writing a show about Gen Z and millennials. I need those voices in the room. You can't have a room of 40 and 50-year-old married people with kids writing about, I mean, you can, but that's not the room that Joanna has on Good Trouble. So I think you need your showrunners and your producers to be really mindful of building out a creative family that represents all the points of view for your show.
I think that's a great point. Like, right, your workforce should be reflective of the stories that you're trying to tell, the communities that you're trying to serve. I think that goes for television as well as any marketer or content creator.
I like to piggyback off of Jamila to the fact that, like back in the day when we were younger, brands were allowed to speak to us, right? And now in this new digital age, in this new social media age, the millennials, the Gen Zs, even our generation, we know when somebody's lazy enough to craft a tweet and the tweet is a mission statement, right? Part of our business and business inside the game is to, go and figure out what is under the hood, right? Because if you don't look the part, then you can't say the things and people won't connect with you. And I think that, for us and the ecosystem that we're building, brands the culture needs to talk about the brand, right? In order for the brand to be successful nowadays, right? The brand cannot articulate whatever their mission statement is. It has to come from the culture. It has to come from the athletes, the celebrities, the activists, the educators, right? There's a culture of, people and like-minded people, and that's why we see, change starting to evolve and start to happen, that are saying, no, we want to tell our own stories, right? There's so many stories and great stories like Blackish, right? That is not, we're not just this version of a Black family in America, right? And we're slowly starting to kind of like unstitch the fabric and the education that has been taught to us. And I think for us, it's really about finding, like you said, the DNA, right? Where's the commonality? You know, where is the shared interest? And then with that shared interest, you know, those celebrities or athletes, or let's call it the culture will activate, right? And speak up and speak about, you know, whether it's a TV show, whether it's a brand doing something, because the connection is real and they feel a part of it, more so that they feel like somebody's just like popping up on their page saying something.
Thank you. I had, there's a great question. It was, I think our relationships with one another serve as a powerful way to create change. How can we leverage those relationships to tell even more impactful stories that amplify underrepresented voices?
I think you need more platforms, right? You need more platforms. There needs to be more funding. There needs to be more chances taken in order for, you know, that to happen. There's so many media outlets and so many distribution outlets, and there's so many opportunities to do it yourself. I think the problem that has always been present is just, it's not enough, right? And, you know, there is no, you know, it only feels like there's one controlling pot, right? And that pot always goes to the people you are most familiar with, right? Yeah. And so, you know, I think that there needs to be, you know, more platforms and more funding for platforms and production companies that, you know, have these authentic voices, that can have the resources, you know, to be able to get their material out.
I think it's that, and I also think that one of the things that I love the most about the digital world that we're living in is the ability for creative people to work together and have a community, so that if, I won't say how many years ago when I started out, the only way you were going to get into an executive's door is through an agency if they represented you, la da da da. Now, Issa Rae was doing her digital series with her crew from college that was online, and my best friend in Atlanta, who doesn't even have a TV, could say to me, hey, I don't watch your shows, I can't lie, but I do watch this. And I, as an executive, could find an African-American woman who was creating, I mean, her first series that was online, Awkward Black Girl, was her and her crew, who were like, no one's going to write characters for us, but hey, you want to act and you want to be a DP and you want to write, and let's do it. Let's not wait for somebody to give it to us. And I think that has sort of democratized access in some ways, not saying that those platforms don't need to be there for broader access and to get like funding that, you know, obviously HBO is now paying her a bunch of money, but she didn't do the traditional route, that notion about relationships. And they worked together to create stories that were specific and unique. So I encourage like young storytellers and creators, again, not to wait, like, or not to feel like you have to go the traditional route to tell your story, but to go, wait, my friend's a DP and this one's an editor and XY wants to learn to do PR and they understand social media. Like the system's all over the place, you guys. Like everyone's trying to figure it out. So the opportunity to like change the game or dictate the game is greater than it was for sure when I first came out, and it was kind of much more analog. So I just say to people, as a creative community, your relationships, I think, can definitely be the strength, and those you guys build together. I love seeing people that I remember when they were 20 something and they made something for a nickel. And then you can see them now with a big movie deal and they still have their creative community with them. I think that's beautiful.
I'm loving all the questions that I'm seeing here, and thank you for your replies. I love that, like all voices, people don't recognize the value of their voice. I think people wait for someone else to tell their stories sometimes. And there's a lot of power in using your own unique voice to drive change. Here's a great question for Amanda. How do you differently approach authentic storytelling and amplifying marginalized voices through a nonfiction lens like Small Business Revolution versus a fictional written one like Good Trouble?
Yeah, we love the fact that while our show is considered an unscripted show and falls within the reality show genre, and we use some similar tropes within our creation, that we feel like what we're doing is kind of creating an unscripted show with heart. I think a lot of times when you see network-driven unscripted shows, there's this like element of drama that is forced upon it rather than letting the stories speak for themselves. And so for us, we have big plans for season 6. So we're going to be right now we're producing season 5, which is taking place in Fredonia, New York, which has been very hard hit by the COVID crisis. And so season 5 will be all about how you, first of all, film a TV show via Zoom, but also about how you help small businesses through the COVID crisis. And then for season 6, we're going to be bringing it back home to Minneapolis. And we're going to be focusing on lifting up Black and Brown entrepreneurs along Lake Street, which Lake Street was the front stage to much of what has happened in the country in the last 3 weeks, and was very near where George Floyd was murdered. And we just feel like it's really important to use our platform and the show, not just to tell the stories and tell the truth about how hard it is to be a minority-owned business in terms of access to capital and business support, but also to change hearts and minds and really show how important economic empowerment is, and how empowering entrepreneurs to create their own destiny, to build their own business, to support their own family, to give back to their community, that is truly going to lead to long-term change. I'm so impressed with how many brands are showing up and committing dollars to addressing racial injustice. We feel like our best role that we can play and staying in our lane and doing something that we know how to do is to empower entrepreneurs to run successful businesses. And so in terms of how we amplify marginalized voices, I think we give them our stage. We're going to make the entire season about it. We have featured a lot of minority entrepreneurs over the past 5 seasons, most certainly, but this entire season is going to be about that and telling the truth about, again, the systemic barriers that are in place right now in our society around entrepreneurship for people of color.
I love every time you talk, I'm like, yes, we have to do something extra, something more. So yes. I have another great one. How important is intersectionality and layered experiences in storytelling from a visibility perspective? I think you're on mute, Jamila.
Oh, all I said was, oh, that's a tough one.
Now you have to answer it.
I know. I was like, damn it. I was buying time.
Yes. Eat a Kit Kat.
From a visibility perspective, meaning visibility with the audience?
Or the scenery or the background, or it's.
I think from a representation matters. Like, how important is it to look at? I think we've been kind of talking about it, but how do you look at stories through all these different lenses? If it's a Black show, it's not just all about the Black experience. And if you're a Black writer, you don't only write Black content, right? So I think I'm feeling like this might be a question about an inclusive workforce, and also why is it important to have intersectionality and to tell different stories? As I'm talking, I'm thinking like this also reminds me of, how the bad guy's not always the bad guy. He's layered, like some people love Dexter.
Right.
I remember, when I worked in international and marketing, we had to make sure that we told stories that traveled, that were relatable enough that anyone, anywhere could understand it. But I've never been in your shoes, Jamila. So when you have to do the big pitch to sell it.
Yeah, I think, again, I think your point about the workforce, like the makeup of the groups that are the decision makers, is important, because again, as much as a lot of the shows that we did in my time at ABC, or even I can say if you come to Freeform, they're not monolithic. You don't come in and we all look the same. If anything, my department at the group that was at ABC when I was there was a very diverse group, and we all had very different opinions. But you did know that if it hit that nexus of like our president, who was British and South African and had grown up in South Africa, and my boss, who was Vietnamese, and this one who was Korean, that if all of us had a touchstone, then you went, oh, okay, we have it. So I can't say to you that there's magic. I don't know the exact answer, but I do think it's important to have enough voices in the room that if everyone is coming from the same experience, it's a problem. And I think the creative 100% suffers, and 100% if you don't have an environment where people are willing to disagree and make people feel a little uncomfortable, then I don't think you get good stuff out of it. You know, I think if everybody's too afraid to say, well, actually, that's not appropriate, or that's like, if everyone's just too PC, I don't think you get the authenticity out of it, if that makes any sense. So I think it's important to have a representative workforce for sure. But in addition, I think people need to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
I was just about to say that. That's where Baron and I connected, was on that. You have to be able to have get comfortable with these uncomfortable conversations in order to drive change.
Right.
Baron.
Right. Or you get a Pepsi situation, right? Or most recently you get a situation, you know, like Snapchat, you know, where, you know, the chains break when you smile. And, you know, I personally called Evan and I was like, who's responsible for that?
Was that real? I thought that was a joke, Baron.
That was the diversity team, right? And yeah, and it was like, that's the diversity team. So, you know, it's like, really, it was like those are the Black people in the company. And it's like, well, you have to get down and into the layers, right? And having one voice, you're always going to get, you know, somebody is going to always be offended, I said it, right? And so having that devil's advocate, right? Having that uncomfortable conversation helps you find like the humanality, right? In whatever piece of content or marketing content that you're trying to convey as a brand, right? And I think that you have to have these different opinions. You have to have combative opinions, because it's only going to make the piece feel more authentic.
I think that was a great lead-in for, I have one last question for you guys, and it was, where do you find inspiration? But I think it's also, where do you learn from, is the addition to that for the stories you create from a brand perspective. Is it audience-led or brand-led? Leading the question here, you know how I think about this one, but how do you guys feel about it?
For me, I would say it's all about my peers, right? It's all about my peers. You know, I study history in college. History repeats itself, and history have some of the best stories to play after. So for me, it's more about, you know, listening to the streets, I would say, you know what I mean? Being a part of the streets, being a part of the culture. So, you know, like the story that you have to tell for mainstream, like you still need to keep some of that DNA and that fabric. So it's just like, you know, where do you find the authenticity? And for me, I find my inspiration in people being in the streets, being, you know, in a book or reading history.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I actually don't know your opinion, Cristina, but I'll hear it. I wouldn't even say the audience as a like monolithic audience. I'd say it is people, like, for sure, to bear when you're saying it's listening and not being sort of up in our, sitting up high thinking we know, like when you're like in the streets. Like my niece is here right now and she's about to turn 18 and I'm talking to her about voting and it's important, and she's like, I'm not going to vote. And I was like, what? You know, I get all the arms, and she said, what are my choices? She's like, it's not like I have Barack. Trump's the worst. Biden might be this. What? And I was like, oh, right. Not that, but I need to listen to them. Like I can go from my perspective about the importance of voting, but their generation is living through something different. And the way we need to talk about voting for them isn't the same as what it was for me. So, and that's not just research reports, which I get a lot of, But again, I'm all up in their business. Like my assistants, like I said, when I said they're in my meetings, I show them pitches that come in. I'm like, does this feel relevant to you? Because my audience is not my demographic. So listening for me is really key. And that's also the most fun part of my job, because I'm learning so much. So assuming that I know what's important to them or what's going to be meaningful to them, I just don't find that useful. So as I said, I for sure, if you're an intern in my department, you're in pitches, because I want to know, like, if you're not going to watch it, I don't need to buy it. I'm 45. Like, I'm not who we're targeting right now. And I want to know what they're buying. You know, I said my age, it's fine. So yeah, my long-winded way of saying listening. And again, in my company, because of the demographic we target, we're very inclusive. Every week we have brainstorming meetings on Mondays where if there's things we're tussling with, I bring it to the group to say, okay, what are you guys looking for? And I always leave it honestly inspired and thinking about something in a way I would have never entered the room thinking about it.
I promised one last question, but this is my last one, because we're going to wrap it up with this. And it's a rapid fire question. So whatever pops to the top of your head, because we've had so many great insights from this conversation, but I do like to end all talks with a call to action. I typically like to ask people, what could they accomplish should they decide to not stay in their lane? I think this is a lot of what we're seeing now, is people having to get comfortable being uncomfortable and trying new things and talking about different things. But again, this means that we are not in a thought leadership moment. We're in a moment where action leadership is more valuable than ever. So what's the one takeaway that you would give this audience about how they can drive change? Whether that's an entrepreneur, a creative exec, or a business leader.
I think it's about understanding your platform and what access you have to drive good. And remember when I was even first going, what you said, rapid fire, I'm going to talk too long, I know. But when I was first deciding what career to go into, I wanted to do something that was going to make a difference in the world. And for a long time, I thought that would only mean going into the nonprofit sector or joining the Peace Corps. And now I realize that from a corporate role, I have the ability to affect goodness, because as brands, we are standing behind giant megaphones. We have access to resources, both human capital as well as real capital, and we or financial capital. And you know, I think it's about all of us understanding within our role, how can we positively make other people's lives better in whatever version better means to that person, not to what you think is better for them. And I think we can all affect goodness, and we need to have goodness within the corporate space. We need to have it within the film industry. We need to have it within the nonprofit sector. But I think for so long, we thought about business as either you're in the for-profit space, you're in business to make money, or you're in the nonprofit space to do good. And I think we need to stop thinking of them as so mutually exclusive and think about how we bring those two things together. Again, how can you do good for your business, but do good for the customer base that you serve? And we all serve different sectors, and we can affect positivity and goodness in so many different ways. And I think it's just all about listening to what goodness means to that audience. So like, as we approach season 6, we're going to be doing a ton of listening about what would actually be powerful help for that community, not guessing what we think would be helpful, but truly listening to how we can make an impact and truly lift up Black entrepreneurs. And it's going to be about having difficult conversations and understanding that we're there to truly help, but to listen to what help would really feel like.
I think active listening is the superpower of any great content creator, storyteller. Baron and Jamila?
I'll go.
What you said. What you already said.
I would say for me, just the advice I would give is, head down, stay focused. Learn from your failures just as much as you will learn from your success. Be open to telling the truth, and also be open and be willing to say, how can I help? And then to, big brands out there, don't just talk about it, figure out a way to be about it, and don't talk about it before you actually take action. And so, to the entrepreneur, never give up. To the big corporate exec, do the part before you start to, shout and champion something that you haven't been a part of.
Jamila?
Yeah, what he said.
I wanted to say thank you I'm blessed. You guys are my friends, so I get to hear and spend time with you guys, and we get to plot how to do well and make our jobs feel really meaningful all the time. I'm thanking you for spending your time so that we could share your thoughts with Notch and the broader audience. So, and thank you everyone for your fantastic questions and your comments. I'm planning to go back and read all of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Bye, everybody. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Jamila.